The Dead Sea has been called a place where life itself goes to die. Its waters are so toxic that no fish swim, no plants grow, and no creature survives. But now, something strange may be stirring in those cursed waters, something Ezekiel himself once foresaw. Could the world's saltiest sea be hiding the first flickers of life? Or is prophecy unfolding before our eyes? Stay with us because what you're about to hear might leave you questioning everything. Before we can even begin to ask whether prophecy is unfolding, we need to understand where this whole mystery plays out. Have you ever wondered why the Dead Sea has such a chilling reputation? What makes the Dead Sea so different that people call it both a wonder and a curse? Let's take a closer look. A unique natural wonder. Standing on the edge of a lake that looks calm and inviting, you soon realize it hides a secret in every ripple. The Dead Sea rests at the lowest point on Earth's surface, a deep blue pool bordered by white salt crusts and rugged cliffs that seem frozen in time. Scientists call it a hypersaline lake, meaning its waters are so packed with minerals and salts that they are 10 times saltier than the regular ocean. Because of these extreme conditions, fish and plants cannot survive, and this is exactly why people long ago named it the Dead Sea. Despite the bleak title, the shores are full of activity. Travelers come to float without effort, read a book on their backs, and cover their skin with dark mud. For generations, people have believed the black mud and mineral-rich waters hold healing qualities. In ancient times, kings and queens visited these shores, and today clinics still recommend controlled Dead Sea treatments for certain skin conditions. While it is not a cure, some patients find short-term relief, and the experience itself is unlike anywhere else. To scientists, the word dead is misleading. It doesn't necessarily mean empty. You see, the lake does not host fish, yet it is not completely empty of life, and in recent years divers have found underwater springs where fresh water seeps through the salty crust, creating craters filled with microbial mats. These microscopic communities thrive in narrow zones where fresh water and brine meet. They do not change the chemistry of the whole sea, yet their presence tells a story of survival in one of Earth's harshest waters. The water here is not only salty, but is rich in magnesium and other ions that influence everything from the way the Dead Sea's surface ripples to how quickly sweat evaporates on your skin when you touch it. To scientists, chemistry matters because it pushes the boundaries for what microbes can tolerate. For visitors, the unique chemistry of the water matters because floating in the Dead Sea feels completely different from floating anywhere else. The very minerals that make survival impossible for fish turn a quick swim into what feels, for many, like a normal holiday. However, the picture is not the same as it once was in the beginning. Since the mid-90s, the Dead Sea has been shrinking. Rivers that once fed it, especially the Jordan River, have been diverted to supply farms and cities. As the shoreline pulls back, the land becomes unstable. Fresh groundwater dissolves and buries salt deposits, leaving hollow spaces that suddenly collapse into sinkholes. Well, sinkholes are sudden holes that open up in the ground when the land above loses its support. Around the Dead Sea, they happen because fresh groundwater seeps in and dissolves the thick layers of salt left behind as the sea keeps shrinking. Once that salt is gone, the surface has nothing solid to rest on, so it collapses. What you get is a deep pit that can appear without warning, sometimes big enough to swallow palm trees, cars, or whole chunks of road. Now, over the years, so many sinkholes have formed and they've taken over areas people once used, like parking lots for tourists, groves where date palms grew, and even parts of the highway. In other words, land that was once safe and useful is now full of gaping holes, making it dangerous and unusable. Even some beaches once open to the public are now abandoned, and access to the water has become more dangerous in certain areas. These changes have forced scientists to look deeper, not only at the shrinking shoreline but at what is happening below the surface itself. That's why in 2024, new studies revealed strange chimney-like towers rising from the lakebed. They are called white smokers, which release briny water where underground salt meets fresh inflow. Scientists believe such structures may even signal where future sinkholes could open along the coast. They also show us that the Dead Sea, though shrinking, is not static. It is alive in a geological sense, constantly reshaped by salt, water, and time. And now, this leaves us with a puzzling question. How can a lake too salty for fish be a magnet for health seekers? How can a place called dead still foster hidden colonies of microbes? And why does a shoreline that has appeared timeless now change so quickly year after year? If new springs continue to surface and conditions keep shifting, could these changes open the door for more forms of life than we ever expected? It leaves the question hanging, making us wonder what might come next. We've seen what makes the Dead Sea such a strange place in nature, but what did Ezekiel really see when he spoke about these waters, and why are people still debating his words today? The biblical basis: Ezekiel's prophecy. Ezekiel's story begins in exile, where he became a priest who later turned prophet during one of Israel's darkest hours, when Jerusalem had fallen and its people were dragged into Babylon. His early messages were heavy with warnings about judgment, but later his visions pointed toward hope, rebuilding, and a future only God could arrange. This is the voice behind one of Scripture's most striking scenes about water and life returning to a barren landscape. The vision unfolds in Ezekiel 47. Here, Ezekiel reveals that water begins to flow from the threshold of a restored temple, moving east toward the Jordan Valley and down into the basin that holds the Dead Sea. In this vision, Ezekiel hears his heavenly guide explain that when this water reaches the salty sea, the water there becomes fresh. He is told that swarms of living creatures will thrive wherever the river goes, and that there will be very many fish. The image builds toward a surprising line: its fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean. Fishermen will stand along the shores, spreading nets. The picture is vivid, practical, and rooted in places his listeners knew. Well, that's not all. Ezekiel even used landmarks to specify the settings. He named the western shore En Gedi, and towards the east side, he called it En Eglaim. These points frame the Dead Sea almost from one side to the other, signaling that the entire stretch is transformed into a working fishery. In other words, the prophecy does not hint at a small pond or a corner cove. It points to a transformed coastline where nets are worth casting again. Now, the question, of course, is how to interpret it. For many, the prophecy is more than just geography. The river stands for renewal flowing out from God's presence. After chapters about loss and exile, Ezekiel's water signals renewal spilling outward from God's presence, a fresh start for a people who thought their future had dried up. The temple in the vision represents God dwelling with his people. The water that deepens as it flows stands for life that multiplies beyond human power. In this reading, the Dead Sea is a canvas for hope rather than a map to decode. But for others, they take the vision more literally. They believe the prophecy describes real landscapes and real change still to come. The river, in their view, will one day physically freshen the Dead Sea, and its shores will be lined with actual fishermen hauling in nets heavy with diverse species, just as Ezekiel described. They believe that En Gedi and En Eglaim will become more than landmarks, defining the new borders of a changed coastline. On another spectrum, we have those who walk in the middle line, which are the scholars. They point out that prophets often use familiar landscapes to make spiritual truths concrete. To them, a swelling river speaks to abundance in a way words alone can't. Fishermen lining the shore paints a picture of stability, food, and shared life. Whether symbolic or literal, Ezekiel chose the most lifeless body of water his audience could imagine, and he filled it with life. That tension between real geography and layered meaning is part of why this vision still captures attention. However one chose to interpret it, the text is clear about the sequence. The water originates at the temple, flows east through the Arabah, enters the Dead Sea basin, and turns salt into something that sustains life. Then the living creatures will come, many fish, and a working shoreline. It is a movement from sacred source to public blessing, from a single spring to a whole ecosystem restored. The focus is not on human engineering or luck. It is on what happens when life-giving water moves into dead places. But now, since we cannot rewrite the Bible, it is still ideal to ask, could Ezekiel's barren water be that same lake, famous for salt and silence, envisioned as teeming with fish in a future only God could bring about? People of faith answer this in different ways. Some find their hope in the symbolism of renewal, others hold to a concrete fulfillment still to come.